When a couple finds out that they are having a child, one of the first things that they begin to think about is what names can they give to their child. Some choose to know, some families, whether they're having a boy or a girl, but some wait and they see, well, they're surprised on the day of the birth. But usually they have names picked out. Some parents have to look at the child, at the baby, in order to say, yes, he looks like a certain name, or she looks a certain way, and that's what we'll name them. Or maybe they're surprised by that name. It's a Holy Spirit moment that they come up with. But a name is something so important because it stays with us for our whole lives. So parents have to be very, very prayerful, very considerate, and very thoughtful when they give a name to their child. Because many organizations know us, not by a name, but by a number. For instance, the IRS only knows us by our Social Security number. The bank knows us by an account number. But we're not numbers, we are people. And because we are people, we respect the dignity that is in each person. And that's what a name gives. A name gives a sense of dignity. I know that we should relish our name and hopefully appreciate our name. Boys and girls, I'd ask you, ask your parents, why did they name you a certain way? Why did they give you the name that they gave you? I'll tell you, my parents gave me the name Stephen because I'm the third child in my family. And I have two older brothers. So I kind of figure that by this point, they had picked all their favorite boy names. And so they went to a calendar. They pulled out the church calendar, and I think they looked up dates that our family had certain events. They looked up their wedding day. They got married the day after Christmas. And the day after Christmas is the feast of Saint Stephen. So I always think it's nice that I'm named after the saint that has a connection to my parents' wedding day. My middle name is Douglas. And Douglas, I have an uncle who is Douglas. And if you put the names together, Stephen Douglas, as a little bit of history, I know Father Bowman loves history, he would tell you that Stephen Douglas is a famous figure because he ran against Abraham Lincoln in the 1858 Senate race in Illinois, and they had the Lincoln-Douglas debates. But also, Stephen Douglas was famous as an actor in the 1960s. He was a father in the show My Three Sons, and maybe you remember that show. I think it was in black and white, so maybe you've forgotten it by this point. But I'm grateful for the name my parents gave me. And I feel that God calls not only me by name, He calls each one of us by name. Individually, because we're all unique. We are all precious. So when God calls our name, we have to respond and say, I'm here, Lord, here I am. Now, when your mom or dad calls your name, it usually means two things. Either that they want you for something, and maybe they want to tell you that they love you, but it also means that maybe you're in trouble. And probably we can all tell, maybe your husband or wife calls you and you know the way they say your name, if it's a good thing or maybe it's a bad thing. You kind of probably have that feeling. Well, God calls our name because He loves us. Because He loves us so much, He gives us a soul, and He gives us a body, and He gives us that ability to live life, to take a breath every single day. Sometimes we wander away from God, and when we wander away from God, He never forgets us. So the Good Shepherd not only calls us by our name, but as we hear in the gospel, the Good Shepherd also calls us back. The Good Shepherd loves us so much that even though we may wander away, we are called back. You see, He knows each of the sheep. And if you've ever seen a herd of sheep and a shepherd trying to keep them together, they all kind of hear the voice of the shepherd. So we have to listen for that. But if we wander away, well, then the sheep always come back because the shepherd goes looking for them. As we hear in the scriptures, the 99 can be in the pen, but if just one wanders off, he goes and he finds them. Sometimes we wander off from God. There's times where we walk away. Maybe we're not present to him. I'll tell you, God is always present to us, but we're not always present to him. And we're not always present to him. Maybe we have distractions in our life. Maybe there's other priorities that we consider priorities, but God still loves us and knows our name. And just know that as the Good Shepherd, he calls us back to him. So if perhaps you're even away from the church, if you've wandered away from God, know that out of love, he brings you back. And he doesn't love you any less, but he gives the gift of mercy and of peace. We just have to ask for it. So he calls us by name. As the Good Shepherd, he goes looking for each one of us. But also, Jesus, as the Good Shepherd, lays down his life for us. He lays down his life for us every time we celebrate Mass. We remember that he gave his life for us because we take simple elements, which is what Jesus did at the Last Supper, of bread and wine. And we take the bread and the wine, and I thought maybe I would ask the children a few questions today. I asked them if they wanted me to ask them questions or their parents questions, and they said that I need to ask the parents questions. However, I think it would be better to just ask the children perhaps today. So maybe Emery, when Jesus said at the Last Supper, he took bread, and he said, this is, with the bread, he said, this is my body. What did he say? He said, this is my body, okay? And then he took a cup, and it was filled with wine. And maybe you could tell me, who would like to tell me? Let's see. Stephen. Wow, what a great name. Your parents were so smart, I tell you. Stephen, when he took the wine, he said, and he held it up and he said, this is my blood. Very good. So it's the body and the blood. And what do we call the body and the blood of Christ? What do we call it, Jackson?
The Eucharist.
The Eucharist. Very good. Now, Catherine, what do you think Eucharist means? Do you have any idea? Any thought? That might be a hard one. Maybe I should ask your mother because she teaches in our school. So I think that would be great. Maybe it could be a family conference here, okay? What does Eucharist mean? Thanksgiving. Oh, Mrs. Guyon, you're so good. I'm glad. Very good. Whoops, I kind of messed up your banner here, Jacob. There you go. Okay, so how about Holland? The Eucharist means Thanksgiving. And I talked about the Last Supper, but what day did the Last Supper take place? When do we celebrate it? Especially, it's right before Easter, okay? The Fernandos, maybe Mr. Fernando, Johan, maybe you could tell me, what do you think what day was it that we really celebrate the Mass of the Lord's Supper is on Holy Thursday? You were kind of mumbled that a little bit, and okay, you're waiting for your wife to back you up on that. Okay, very good. Well, maybe I could ask the Boggs something then, and Josie Hickman. Okay, Grandma, should we go to Grandma maybe and ask Grandma? What comes after Holy Thursday? After he gave his body and blood, then he was put on a cross. What day did that happen?
Friday.
On Good Friday, very good. It was on Good Friday. And then Bennett's. There's twins here today. This is Lauren and Megan. So Lauren and Megan, maybe you could tell me, what day did Jesus rise from the dead? On Sunday. And what do we call that? We call it Easter Sunday. Very good. So wow, I think they know their stuff. I think everybody was well prepared, parents included, which is a good thing. That's what we celebrate during this Easter season. We're still in Easter, and we're still celebrating the body and blood of Christ, his suffering, death, and resurrection. That's what we call the Paschal mystery. Today, boys and girls, you're brought into that mystery. God is inviting you, and you're saying yes. So in just a few moments, we're going to call each of you by name. Each one of you. Father Josh is going to call your name, and I'm going to tell you a little secret. We told Father earlier in the week that he was going to have to read the names. So guess what? For days, he's been practicing your names, and he was all nervous about it. But if he doesn't say it right, then you know what? You just kind of let it go. And outside, when you're having cake, okay? Tell him he can't have any of the cake because he didn't pronounce your name right. But when your name is called, it's like on the day of your baptism, we called you by name and asked your parents what name they gave you, and they told us. But today, this is like a continuation of your baptism because you're now receiving Jesus. And so as you receive Jesus, we're going to call your name today, and we want you to stand up, and we want you to say, what should we have them say? I don't know, maybe you could tell me. Miss Long, okay? Maybe Margaret. What are you going to stand up and say? Here I am, Lord. Okay, now are you going to sound like a little church mouse? Or are you going to say, Catherine, here I am, Lord? No, this is a big church. So you have to talk. There's people all the way in the back by St. Therese statue. So you have to say it nice and loud because today is a big day and he's calling you by name. You'll come up, you'll put your hands on the altar, and then in that spot is where we'll take afterward bread and wine, and they become the body and blood. So it's a way to honor that particular place.